So first we have the cerebral cortex.
The cerebral cortex is the outer layer of the brain responsible for the most complex mental functions, such as thinking and planning. It's the wrinkly outer layer and it's split into the left and right hemisphere. Hemispheres are both divided into frontal lobes, parietal lobes, occipital lobes, and temporal lobes.
Next is the brainstem.
Which is the oldest part and central core of the brain. It's responsible for automatic survival functions.
Then we have the medulla oblongata.
And that controls the heartbeat and breathing.
Then the reticular formation.
Which is responsible for the sleep-wake cycle and arousal.
Then we have the pons, which is wrapped around the brainstem.
And the pons play a key role in both sleeping and dreaming.
Then we have the cerebellum.
And the cerebellum coordinates voluntary movement.
Now we have the thalamus, which is in the light pink right here.
And the thalamus receives almost all incoming sensory information, organizes it, and relays it to the cortex.
Then we have the basal ganglia, which is the blue.
And that works with the cerebellum and cerebral cortex to control voluntary movements.
Next we have the hypothalamus, which is in purple under here.
And that controls many motivated behaviors like eating, drinking, and sexual activity. It controls automatic functions such as body temperature and heart rate.
Then we have the pituitary glands.
And the pituitary gland controls growth and regulates other glands, also known as the master gland.
Then we have the hippocampus, which is right here.
And the hippocampus is involved in the learning and storage of long-term memories.
And finally, we have the amygdala coming off the hippocampus.
And that influences aggression and fear.
Here in the pink, we have the corpus callosum.
And that connects both sides of the brain.
Now, let's head on over to a more in-depth view of the cerebral cortex. First, we have our frontal lobe.
And the frontal lobe involves personality, intelligence, and voluntary control of muscles.
Then we have our parietal lobe.
And that processes sensory information that has to do with taste, temperature, and touch.
The next lobe is the occipital lobe.
And that processes and responds to visual stimuli.
And we have the temporal lobe.
And that is involved in hearing, language processing, and memory.
Then in these lobes, we have the motor cortex.
And that controls voluntary movements, like especially in precise areas like the fingers and mouth.
Then next to it is the sensory cortex.
And that interprets information on touch, temperature, pain, and pressure, and allows us to perceive the size, shape, and texture of objects.
Here in red, we have the Broca's area.
And that is involved in speech production.
And then in sparkly pink, we have the Wernicke's area.
And that is involved in understanding spoken language.